Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Eden Hour. We are here on video for a very special episode with a very special guest. My name is Tiffany. I lead marketing for Magic Eden, and
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm CEO and co-founder of Magic Eden. Super excited to have
Raj Gokal, co-founder of Solana and Solana Labs and Solana Foundation.
For today, I think we just want to have a casual conversation with Raj, talk a little bit about him, his journey, his career, his upbringing, and then we'll talk a little bit about Solana. And yeah, it'll be pretty free-flowing, and we'll just figure it out. So,
Cool.
I guess, yeah, where are we right now, guys?
We're in New York City.
Yeah, New York. I think, are you here for the Hacker House right now, or does anything else bring you here?
100%.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm here too. So, yeah, it's been amazing. We've been having hacker houses all over the world. Kind of a world tour. I think we'll have by the end of it at least a couple dozen cities on the books. There's one in Prague. The ones coming up are in Miami. There's I think we're gonna do one we had an awesome one in LA. Each of them is kind of really like tailored to the vibe and the culture of the city, the types of builders that are there, the type of creators that are there. So LA was like very creator heavy. There were a lot of artists, musicians, and actors that came through. I think the New York one is like super, I don't know, it's everyone's building, like everyone's just like glued to their monitors. I think there have been over 1,000 like developers that have passed through, so really cool. We're probably gonna head there after this.
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel like Solana has made hacker houses cool. It feels freaking amazing. So what's the story of like how you guys got hacker houses and got the idea?
Yeah, I think like everything with Solana and the Solana ecosystem, it starts with the builders. So in Lisbon in November of last year, we had Breakpoint, which was, I kind of chose that name Breakpoint for a reason. It's, last year, 2021 was just such a whirlwind for everybody. I mean, that was when Magic Eden started. It was when, NFTs found their life on Solana and really exploded. And the crypto industry in general was just in this really, really explosive period, and it still is. But we all are humans, and we have kind of human needs and human rhythms. And at the end of last year, we had Breakpoint as this especially coming out of COVID, this moment where everyone can just come together, be in person. We didn't even really have that much structure around it. I mean, the structure kind of followed once we decided we're all going to Lisbon at the same time. And we were the first community to decide on Lisbon. And then actually it ended up that all the other conferences, scheduled around that as well. But, I think I've worked with tons of, fantastic engineers in my life. Like, most of them are not into conferences. They're not, really going to network. They, if they're going, it's kind of they're forced to, or they see it as like hygiene, like brushing your teeth, like you have to go.
Yep.
And so I think we always want to be mindful of the type of person that really wants that in person, but just wants to keep building. So I think it was Bartosz and Jordan, two pretty amazing engineers in the Solana Labs team that kind of went off on their own, and in parallel to this this big fancy production of the Breakpoint conference, rented a big house and just said, this is the hacker house, this is where all the devs can go, no distractions, just build.
Yep.
And it ended up getting completely filled. All the desks were filled. It was the energy was really buzzing. There were whiteboards up, people were putting up bounties. People are holding up signs, if you build this feature, I'll pay up 40,000 USDC or whatever. There are young people, coding for the first time, building on blockchain for the first time, just trying to learn, find some mentorship. People that, had existing teams and were finding new team members, teams that were like splitting up and reforming and, finding their new co-founders. So, I came to San Francisco for the first time in an incubator. We used the 500 Startups office when we first were getting Solana off the ground.
Yeah.
And I think the Y Combinator days of, like a structured program, a lot of those were, in person with regimented like meeting schedules. I think crypto moves way too fast for that.
Yeah.
But the in-person is important, and the focus on building and hacking is important. And so this is just, this whole Hacker House series kind of evolved off of that initial, very ad hoc, just like, none of the branding was there at the original Hacker House. It was just white walls, whiteboards. But now, we've kind of put the branding on it, and market it more. So it's got a life of its own. I think this is how the best things start.
Yeah. I love that, like, in Solana, like, everything just feels really organic. Just, like, hearing that story about, like, it wasn't pre-planned. It was, Bartosz and Jordan, we've worked with them. We love working with them. Like, just folks who had an idea just organically ran with it, right? And then it kind of, it got launched and bubbled up to be something that was amazing. Well, I actually have one question. Like, one of the things from our interactions I always thought was, I love how you focus on the human aspect of, like, building, focusing on the builders in these conferences, and focusing on the human aspect of maybe, like, showcasing creators and stuff. I'd love to learn a bit more about you as a person, right? And your origin story.
Good segue. You're on the podcast.
Not pre-planned at all. But yeah, I would love to, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've heard some tidbits every now and then, but I actually love to hear it in your own words.
Yeah, I guess my background is I grew up in South Georgia, so I wasn't like growing up in Silicon Valley or in around New York City. Like I wasn't surrounded by people that were in industries like tech industry, finance industry, or entertainment. I was in like regular deep South America. So I think that kind of colors a lot of like my career and what I've tried to do. It's for me, nothing is valuable if it doesn't reach normal people and transform their life for the better.
Can I ask you a question? How was your family even in South Georgia? It seems so...
Good question. So I only recently started to uncover this stuff and ask these questions, but my family's Indian. They were in South Africa for a couple generations. And then, in the late 70s, decided to come to the U.S. Just to, like any immigrant family. I think one older brother came first, and then was just like looking for opportunity and a place to create a path for the rest of the family to move over. And the path that they found was in like motels.
No way.
Yeah. So and pretty. Basic, like run-of-the-mill side of the highway motels for like truckers type of stuff is where they started. And so the way they started was by going up and down the East Coast and basically talking to like owners of these properties and doing manual spreadsheets on paper, like because they didn't have computers. They were literally just like crunching the numbers, like seeing where do the numbers look best. And in South Georgia, like on the border of Florida and Georgia, was where the numbers looked best. It was very accessible. It was cheap.
Wow.
And so that was where they bought the first motel. And then they my dad moved over. Like they started moving families over to like work and support it. And then that was like how my family got their start in the U.S. But that ended up with me, a brown kid, like in deep South Georgia, where I was like the only brown kid, right?
Yeah.
So that was quite an interesting experience. I never really traced back like why until recently. I started kind of getting family history a little bit more and learned about how that decision was made.
What was it like growing up in that environment?
I think I always felt like an outsider, like I didn't really know that I was Indian until somebody asked me like, "Are you black or white?" In like kindergarten. That was like the first time I was like, I don't actually know if I'm black or white. What am I? And that's so I had to start asking questions like that and kind of also sort of realizing how different that microcosm of the world was from the rest of the world. And I think the world that I that I thought existed or aspired to exist. Like, because I was a kid, on the internet, like I kind of ended up learning everything on my computer in my room, because I went from like 28K to 56K internet to, I had to like, get a job to pay for DSL internet so my mom would stop interrupting on the phone, because I was like really into it. And I started to see the difference between the world around me every day and the world that I started to learn about. Because I didn't actually leave until I was 18. Like I hadn't really gone outside of Georgia.
Born and bred, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was also why I became really passionate about technology, because the internet was my first community that I actually felt like I belonged to, and it was on like internet message boards and chat rooms, and and I built relationships with like anons that I didn't know, that taught me. They were the first people that taught me how to how to find resources to learn design and learn how to make websites and code, because nobody in my town was doing that stuff. Nobody was working in technology, and I made all the websites for like the all the businesses in my town, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Are they still live? Are they in
I
garage?
don't maybe, I don't know. I will look for some, and you can include links in that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
Wow, yeah. I certainly relate. I actually finished high school in Nebraska, and even I grew up in Taiwan, and yeah, just hung out on the internet a lot. You guys remember Zanga, like the blog site? I would like make HTML like layouts for my friends in exchange for like petty cash. And then, just like remember being a 12-year-old, like hanging out in like Yahoo chat rooms, just like trying to make friends.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. Okay, so internet was kind of your first community. And then something you also told us in another meeting we had with our company was how much you loved art as a kid.
Totally, yeah.
So what was that about? Like, what did you like creating?
Yeah, I mean, I was always like a sketch artist, and I used like, I don't know, colored pencils. I never really got into painting when I was a kid. I couldn't really afford like the all the supplies, and I didn't realize how different painting was from sketching. But yeah, like I always won all the art contests, and I was when people ask me what do you want to do, I was either gonna be a cartoonist, because I loved cartoons, I loved animation, or I was just like, I'm just gonna be an artist and like figure it out. And actually my parents like totally supported me to do that, but we didn't have much money growing up, and I chose against that myself, because I didn't see like a clear path to not just finding commercial and professional success in the long term, but also like getting something quickly that could immediately like improve my family's life. So instead, I think what I told myself was, let me focus on the the technology side, and bring my kind of creative energy to the business world, and then just start in some career paths that are a little more like lucrative, and pay off student loans and that kind of thing, and then like come back to it. And I mean, in that regard, like where I am and what I'm working on now, and the community that we've built, and coming back like this full circle to the point where now when I'm at Hacker Houses, when I'm at conferences talking to artists that like launched on Solana, and they remind me of me as a teenager, wanting to be an artist and not seeing a commercial path, and then they found it and now their life has changed, is like it's I can't believe it. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. That is the most exciting part of this entire journey for me, because even within Solana, like it wasn't obvious that we were going to be even relevant in NFTs or art as little as a year ago, right? Like a year ago there were effectively no NFTs on Solana. NFTs in general were somewhat early. Top Shots had found some product market fit. There were a lot of like Beeple stories. Those were all starting to take hold, and it was clear there was something, but it was all on Ethereum and a little bit with NBA Top Shots, and Solana wasn't even in the conversation. Nobody was even talking about this, right? So this is what I love about crypto. It moves so fast. Everything's up for grabs. Everything can change overnight. And yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I think many people in the industry probably think of Solana as a creative and environmentally friendly like NFT platform first, instead of a DeFi platform or a general purpose smart contract platform. So, yeah, I mean, I love it. Like, I think it's, I love DeFi. I love everything about crypto and blockchain, but this side it really resonates with me, you know?
Yeah. Full circle.
You know what we should do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we should find your old artwork and auction it.
Yeah.
Eden. Dude,
I will.
Yeah.
Actually, so you know, do you know Oddkey? Which
Spanoki.
Yeah. So when I first met with Steve Aoki and Todd McFarlane, so when I was growing up, Todd McFarlane was my favorite comic book artist. So I used to do all the I used to create a lot of comic book art. I created my own characters and all of this stuff.
What?
And I showed the first like hardware peripheral I got for my PC was a scanner, so that I could scan in, because nobody told me, but I kind of intuited like, okay, if you make a line drawing, I think I saw some of the comics and I was like, that doesn't look like they're doing like ink anymore. It looks like they're creating these gradients. It looks like the stuff that I'm learning how to do in Photoshop, right? So I like saved up and went to Costco and got a scanner, and I bought it so I could do line drawings and then import it into Photoshop and use Photoshop to color it. And the first one that I have is from 2009, I think. No, not 2009. It was 1999. So I was 11. Was a recreation of Todd McFarlane's Game Informer cover.
Dude.
Yeah, it's the oldest. It's the oldest JPEG in my like Google Drive. All my backups that I have at all is from when I was 11 years old, when I like saved up money to get a scanner to recreate Todd McFarlane's art. So I showed him this image when we were first talking to him about how he could bring his art onto blockchain and how he could make use of NFTs. And Steven, who's now the CEO of Metaplex, also showed him like a picture of him when he was 7, dressed up as Spawn for Halloween. And but yeah, I mean, like that was super surreal, right? And yeah, I've got a bunch of that art from way back. I want to drop it at some point, like for charity or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's definitely
for more kids to pursue art. I can already see it in my mind. That's amazing.
Actually, I think it's really amazing this circle, like this full circle story. I think it's kind of amazing how life happens that way, huh? Like you. I think like maybe like Tiff and I will, and some of our co-founders at Magic Eden have kind of like similar spirits in some ways, right? Of wanting to do something but having to make some trade-offs against the realities of life, but that fire is always in you to do something, you know? And then it's kind of like how I think about it, like sometimes the universe will give you a way, like if you want it bad enough, and it doesn't happen in this exact shape and form that the way you want, but when it happens, it feels right in your heart, kind of thing. Like, for example, for Magic Eden, like, I think Sid, our CTO and co-founder, he always wanted to start a company. The first job he came out of high school, out of university, he dropped his like investment banking internship, which was like the pinnacle
Sid
of.
was an iBanker.
He like had he had an investment banking internship, and then we all grew up in Australia, and that was like the pinnacle of university grads, like career aspirations, and he dropped that to start this like Bitcoin company. And then I went to law school, so I didn't even understand tech. I was like a Luddite, right? But I was very good friends with Sid, friends since high school, and I saw him do this thing, and I was inspired. I was like, oh my god, holy shit! Like I want to do what he's doing. Like he's so brave, so courageous to like do something that steps outside the mold, right? So I like followed him to go to Boston, where he had raised some money, and then just against the realities of life, right? Like things wasn't working, you feel pressure to like put some logos on your resume. Like I went back to Australia and all of this, but something inside of us always wanted to do something creative, like to build something about ourselves, and I don't know, like build something that like other people feel there's value. Like when you help someone and you see the smile on their face, it's amazing. Like it's like the most amazing feeling ever. And all of this thing happened we never thought that we'd get together, squad together to start Magic Eden, but when we did, it just felt right. You know?
Yeah.
It felt like the thing that you were always kind of wanted to do, you know.
Right.
You know.
I like it's kind of cheesy, but if you've ever read like The Alchemist, that book, I was having a lot of the feelings of kind of the universe speaking, you know, to your heart, and I was sort of talking to people about that intuition, and like 3 people told me at the same time, you have to read The Alchemist. And I think the biggest thing from The Alchemist, the kind of you know, fairy tale in there is this idea that like your heart is always speaking to you, but like the longer that you don't listen to it, the quieter the voice gets, and over time, you know, it gets so quiet that you may forget that it ever existed, and you may tell yourself that it was never there. You know, but if you listen for it, if you go out in the wind and listen for it and quiet your mind, it's always still there, and if you feed it and nurture it, it'll come back, right? And I think like this is like my favorite part about crypto right now, and I've always, even before crypto, I think I was in Silicon Valley, I was in startups for 10 years, and I was always trying to be that voice for people, right? Like whatever you're doing, if there's even if you've achieved any of your goals with it that, you know, that kind of put you into a box that, you know, that you didn't intend to be in long term. You're at a big law firm, you're an iBanker, you're in a job where you're just grinding it out and making your name or paying your dues. Like as soon as you feel like you see that opportunity, or you can jump off and take that risk, like if I can be the person to help convince you to do that, like I'm here for you. I'm gonna be the biggest cheerleader, you know?
Yeah. And
I think a lot of people feel this way about Web3 right now, that it's one giant jumping off point for everyone. It doesn't matter what you want to do, what you're good at. There is definitely something here, you know, for all skill sets, and it's still super early. Everyone that gets in, I think, is going to have a lot of time to figure it out, and a lot of margin for error. It's just like, you know, the early tech days, the early internet days.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm all about that, right? Like there's so much chaos here, but it affords for the ability for a lot of people to listen to their heart for the first time again, and find a new career, a new path.
Yeah.
On your LinkedIn, it says on your first job you turned Red Bull into spreadsheets, and then I know you worked across healthcare. And can you tell us a little bit about your journey of how you ended up? How did Solana even happen?
Yeah, I mean, so my journey, as I mentioned before, you know, the first priority for me was to get a high-paying job to pay off my student loans and take care of my family. So I was turning Red Bull into spreadsheets in like investment banking, and I couldn't even like last a year before I was like, I'm gonna at least start recruiting and see where I can jump to next. That, you know, that gets me closer to like, you know, creative output, closer to the technology industry, closer to building, and so I started talking to General Catalyst Partners, which was a venture firm. It still is a venture firm in Boston. They've got a West Coast office now. They're huge, and they're like they were a really big blessing to me, because they were, first of all like former entrepreneurs investing, and that. Now it's pretty commonplace, especially in Silicon Valley, when there's been so many founders that have exited. But at that time, it was a fairly new concept. Like most venture investors were traditional financiers that were just going to that end of the risk curve. And so these guys were like it was like in their slogan, entrepreneurs investing in entrepreneurs. So it's just surrounded by people who had built and exited, you know, software businesses, hardware businesses, medical device businesses, and they were investing across all categories. And I started to develop this. You know, this feeling and thesis about where to jump in, that kind of revolved around the idea of like regulatory capture, and monopolistic industries that had shunned the big waves of, you know, tech innovation and software, where basically there was, you know, I kind of viewed it as like there's a dam that's built up, and when that dam breaks, it's going to be incredibly transformative and valuable. But it's going to take a while for those dams to break, and it's hard to predict when does the dam break. So education was one, and healthcare was one, and finance was one. So I spent all my time in those 3 verticals. And I was just kind of following my nose, and it was around the time that like Jawbone came out with like the first wearables, and then Fitbit was like announcing, and I was like, okay, I know my buddy from college that was like one of my best friends, and we had always wanted to start a company together. He was a biomedical engineer, and he always had this idea for like an artificial pancreas that would be microneedle array for measuring glucose, so it feels kind of like sandpaper, and then an insulin pump. And this is kind of like a holy grail concept in medical devices that this should exist at some point, but you have to get it really accurate, to make an artificial external pancreas. So our twist on it was, what if we make glucose sensors that are like fairly palatable for your average consumer, just kind of feels like a Band-Aid or sandpaper, but use this new Bluetooth Low Energy protocol that just was like 2 months old. And instead of doing accelerometers, which are fairly commoditized for step sensors, just go all the way. Like, if it takes 10 years, let's do it, but let's make body chemistry sensors that input directly to your phone and give you advice on like nutrition and athletic performance if you're an athlete. And the idea there was like, can we find a wedge that we can build such immense value for some set of users so quickly, that's based on a technology platform that we've built and we owned, that you could expand to kind of rebuild the rest of healthcare, right? With more product lines, build a brand, like be the Apple of healthcare. For us, that was like, that's the swing. If you're gonna go into healthcare, we don't want to just go become part of this giant like machine. We want to rebuild it the way we've seen media and entertainment rebuilt. The way we've seen gaming rebuilt. Like, everything had changed entirely as an industry, except for healthcare. So anyway, I mean, we did that for a while. We got a bunch of funding. I couldn't really like stay with a hardware development business for many years without getting users. Like, I needed to know that it was going to work. Last year, that company actually sold, and I'm still really good friends with that co-founder. But after 2.5 years, I was like, let me spend some time in an area where like users are really being touched. Because if I don't start building that expertise, or if we don't start building those systems, then these devices are never gonna like catch hold, and we're never gonna know what to do with the data that comes out of them. So I was at Omada Health, which was an Andreessen Horowitz company, very early days, like 10 or 15 people when I joined, and that was more commoditized hardware. So connected scale, pedometer, and a remote health coach, and that was more of a data company, because we were focusing on finding people that were at risk, like right at the precipice of converting into diabetics or developing cardiovascular disease, and then use this behavioral intervention to get them to lose weight and come back from the cliff, so to speak.
Wow.
So, and then it was, the incentives were really baked in there, because that company only was getting paid if those users lost weight, which was verifiable through these sensors, through the scales, right?
Okay.
So it was starting to play with, what are the incentive level problems in healthcare that need to be fixed? What are the new models, business models, and how does technology unlock these things? But and I mean that company is really successful. I think they're in like almost every major health plan. If you guys start gaining weight, you might get an email that says
Magic Eden 15.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign up after this.
We were just talking at breakfast earlier about the Magic Eden 15, like people gaining weight, which is total startup life. But yeah, I mean, that company's doing really well. I think for me though, and a bunch of people that I worked with, actually Balaji was on the board of that company. Like, there's a lot of people that came from health tech who my belief is that they all saw that window of opportunity to rebuild an industry, and they were looking for the wedges, and they were inserting themselves in those areas and swinging like mad with products to ultimately what they wanted to do was gain enough power to disintermediate health plans, have a direct to consumer relationship, and also just create enough value that regulators couldn't hold back innovation, which is what we had seen with Uber and Airbnb, right? And PayPal. Like, if something's so valuable and reaches so many users so quickly, regulators catch up, because they're not in. I think regulators in their heart are actually good. They don't want to hold back things that are valuable. They just want to make sure people don't get hurt. But if you create a ton of value really quickly, you know, often you can make up for some of the rough edges. That didn't happen in healthcare, right? Like I think there was a generation of builders in Silicon Valley in health tech from 2010, 2011 to like 2016 that were all swinging and just felt like I've described it like Stephen Hess, Metaplex CEO, was I brought him into Omada. Yeah. So he worked with me, and we talk about those times as like sprinting with like 20-pound ankle weights, you know, where you just you know what's possible, but you know the regulation and the incumbency of the health plans just slows everything down. Like every change you want to propagate has to be approved by some massive, you know, group of people. And I think what's happening now, like the way I see crypto is, remember I was thinking healthcare, finance, and education. Like this is finance, right? It's happening. And in some ways, like education, I mean, we've seen the idea of people bypassing the entire like college system and just learn through this community. I don't know if it replaces all of like higher education, but certainly the finance part is absolutely getting rebuilt. And there's no, you know, it never mattered if Goldman or JP Morgan, all the big incumbents cared, right? They didn't care, they didn't take it seriously, they didn't believe in it, they didn't support it, they weren't on board, and they kind of like tried to hold it back, right? They were pretty negative about the entire concept. The entire finance industry was, right? And it's still succeeding, and they had to come around eventually, right? That's what you want as a technologist, right? Is to have the product and the, you know, the value proposition and the use cases like prove themselves out so aggressively that even the most hardened of incumbents has to come around and say, okay, well, we have to play, right? So so I think one of the reasons that, you know, when people talk to me, I'm talking pretty fast, I'm like pretty aggressive, you know. You mentioned in the prompt for this podcast, you said, what are 3 words that describe you? I'll say one word is definitely aggressive. I'm super aggressive, right? Because I know what it's like to be in an industry where you've got 20-pound ankle weights on, and this is not that, right? We have a complete, like, wide open window of opportunity to rebuild everything, and I don't see anything holding us back other than just people, you know, like just getting in the seat and just doing it, right? So to me, with all the scar tissue I have of, you know, industries where you have incumbents, you have regulators holding things back, like I don't see why everyone is not working on this right now, right? Like just jumping in with both feet. So that's why I'm very aggressive. I have an intense, you know, sense of urgency. And again, you know, it's not just finance, right? It's all marketplaces, and it turns out everything is a marketplace, including art, collectibles, like, you know, creative output. Everything is a marketplace because the second somebody pays for it, it's finance. Right?
Well, I'm loving this conversation because I'm loving this conversation in the sense of I don't know, from the outside, crypto can feel, and like Solana as kind of like almost like a frontier chain, if you will. It's not, you know, most folks' entry point into crypto, but I don't know, the outside slogan or like viewpoint is like crypto is so like tech forward. It's about business, it's about making money, it's about this kind of stuff. But really it's like, you know, it's the human story, right? Like I love this journey that you had through health, like, you know, trying to kick down doors and blow shit up, right? But then like walking through quicksand, and I love this, you know, this mental model you shared about like, man, like we have to race to, like regulators are not the ones who are going to like just say you can do it, but you have to build something that's useful for society. But hey, eventually they'll come around. Like there's so many themes that converges so well about like crypto today. And we love Magic and we love aggression as well. I think we love hustling. We have this thing at Magic Eden called Lunatics Only. It was coined by our first BD hire. He goes, we were like trying to hire more BD folks, and we're trying to write this JD, and we're like, like, you know, which company's job description can we just like copy and paste from so we can share this thing? And then he goes, no, like definitely add one thing, which is we want to hire lunatics only, like people who just love the shit and just want to go hard. So yeah, I don't know, it's just amazing actually.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask a question, but I'm just kind of.
In awe.
I'm just in awe, yeah. I'm just fanboying right now.
We should probably just talk about like the state of Solana, how things are right now. Like, what are some of your moonshot goals?
Yeah. I mean, you know, the Solana community, the ecosystem is like it's its own beast. So I'm kind of onlooking, just like everyone else. What I'm seeing, you know, I think we just passed like 60 billion transactions processed. The network has, I think there's been $800 million of primary sales of NFTs. $10 billion, or sorry, tens of billions of dollars have passed through, you know, decentralized exchanges and DeFi protocols. There's, I think right now we're at like 1.5 million NFT holders, and 2.5 million wallets have ever held NFTs, and you know, Phantom, other wallets are growing, you know, tens of thousands of users, sometimes 100,000 or more per week. So it's definitely, you know, it's organically just growing, right? It's I think what I'm always interested in is looking around and seeing, you know, what's the path to mainstream users? Where does this start to click for people? My belief is that similar to like when in the internet, you know, for me, I don't know what it was for you guys, but like for me, the first time I saw someone at a computer instant messaging, like using IRC. And the immediate, you know, feedback from somebody that I knew was in a different country, that was like the clicking moment.
It's like a killer use case.
Yeah. But you know, back then it was obvious and it was quick to get the first like 3 or 4 examples of that. But let's say, you know, if somebody just saw that in a vacuum and saw, okay, this is just a chat machine, right? They would think it's single purpose. They wouldn't really, you know, kind of intuit as a non-technologist, what's the underlying like unlock here? And you know, maybe for some people it was emailing, instant messaging. You know, I don't know how many people got on the internet for the first time just to get that dancing baby gif. And for some people it was publishing, you know, being able to have a persistent identity and a representation of their thoughts or their brand or whatever it is. But I think like in crypto we're starting to build there's definitely the 4 or 5. So, you know, in DeFi you can get access to asset classes and yields through a protocol based set of financial primitives that were just kind of inaccessible.
Yep.
You know, with payments, you can have instant settlements on the same network where you can get that yield.
Yep.
In NFTs, you can be a creator, you can monetize your creation with a global audience immediately. In gaming, you can have interactive experiences that have all of these primitives built in. So it's, if you know, and all of these now, they're not like, they're no longer hypothetical, right? When we first started thinking about, you know, building Solana and what its purpose would be, basically none of these things have been proven out. They were all dreams, and the very small amoeba versions of them existed on Ethereum, and when any of them succeeded at all, it like broke the network. Today, you know, I think the biggest venture-backed businesses that are you know, they're taking swings at these things are all doing it in crypto-native ways. So I think my belief is, you know, we're there. Like we made it from a perspective of like the explosive has been lit, right? I think we're in that very like hockey stick like inflection curve moment where we all know the explosion is in progress. Like it has just started. In exactly what way it unfolds, where the big unlocks are going to be for, you know, I think what we care about is self-custody, like, you know, active transacting users, so people that are signing their own transactions with their own non-custodial wallet. That's where the magic happens. And right now we're at about 250,000 a day, and I think there's going to be big unlocks when you have the first million, the first 10 million, the first 100 million of those. So, you know, it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing. Well, I think we have to ask this question, but like, did you ever think that, you know, NFTs would become so big on Solana? right?
And how did they become?
Yeah, and like, how did it, kind of Solana break through the sound barrier for that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so let me start by saying that the goal with Solana was always to, anything that blockchain was useful for, the belief was that there should be some network who's prioritizing making those use cases accessible in a way that brings the cost of every transaction down to the physical limitations of the cost, brings the latency down to the physical limitation of the latency, and brings the throughput of one single state machine to the physical limitation of the throughput, just given the constraints we have in today's commoditized hardware and network bandwidth, and the time that it takes to go around the world with light.
I'll jump in there. I love this thing that you mentioned about use cases that take off, then you have this crazy moonshot ambition to break things down to physical limitations.
Yeah.
Because I feel like one of the privileges of working on the Solana blockchain is, you really feel like, we're the NFT use case and we feel well supported, because then we can talk to someone and say, hey, this is some emerging cool new behavior that we're seeing, but the standard doesn't support this. Or for example, we're working together on the collection standard, which is emergent from PFPs, which is a crypto native, Web3 kind of phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
And then the foundation just says, let's just build the standard, and make this use case better, easier, more accessible, blow it up even more.
Yeah.
So love that kind of approach to it, which I think is very different from other ecosystems.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's like the internet was still rolling out and getting built as you're also seeing intense product market fit for the internet, and so you get to build the standards around it. So that's, I think, an interplay that you're going to see continuously for good. But yeah, so we built it to be performant for whatever was going to work, and I think our biggest macro thesis is that performance is always going to matter, and it's going to matter in a big way for every use case. We just don't know exactly what UX unlock for each of those use cases is going to be most meaningful. It's going to be different for everything, right? It'll be different in gaming and payments and in NFTs. I think so. To answer your question, how did it happen? Was I surprised? I think the first time that I really understood why NFTs mattered to me was when I saw RAC and Andres Reisinger collab and make Elephant Dreams, and they made Elephant Dreams 2. So it was a one of one. It was beautifully photorealistically rendered animation in a loop with a Grammy Award-winning musician creating custom music for the loop for a 30-second video, going, panning through four or five rooms where the books, the furniture, everything is floating, and it's just they call it a dream. It looks like a dream, right? It feels like a dream, but also I'm not an expert on rendering and that kind of thing, but I imagine it costs a good deal of money and time, not just to make it, but even just to render, that scene. And what made me get it was, first of all, it emotionally resonated with me, intensely. I just was this is the kind of thing I would spend the rest of my life making if I knew how to make it. I don't know how to make it, but I'm just glad that it exists. I'm really happy that it exists right now, and I'm happy that I get to see it. And then I kind of realized, well, yeah, it probably costs, I don't know, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, to render this. If somebody wasn't ready and willing to, to pay probably $100,000 plus for it, or at least the cost basis, then it just never would have been made. It just this is something that wouldn't have existed ever. And that, to me, I've always had this kind of very far back looking nostalgia for a time I didn't actually exist in, which is the Renaissance. This idea that people, just were jumping out of their seats to go and create whatever they could, and that patrons were just showering money on people to just see more of what they thought they wanted to exist in the world exist, and there was no expectation of returns or profit or anything. It was just
Appreciate
you know, it's like a form of shared dreaming, right? That you know, the people who had the resources, all they wanted to do with those resources was enable other people to create what they wanted to see in the world. And so that piece of art was, you know, an unlock for me. And then what we saw, it was a time where like centralized marketplaces like, you know, Rarible and NFT Gateway were really constraining artists to, and we talked to RAC. RAC was like a huge stakeholder in the early days of Metaplex, because I spent like a year like tracking him down.
Hugging him.
Yeah, like why? Because as RAC, as an artist, like why would you want to hear it from a founder of Solana who's like this DeFi chain over here, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like, no, dude, we have to talk. You know, like I need to understand. You know, like where are you blocked? What would you do with performance? Like there has to be something here.
Yeah.
And anyway, you know, the big unlock was something that felt obvious in retrospect. First of all the big brands, all the celebrities were coming to us, and they wanted to build, you know, their own versions of NFT marketplaces, or they wanted to do these like big drops, and they wanted it all to be like custodial and white labeled, and we were just like, we don't know how to do any of that stuff, right? Like that's not our expertise. They basically were trying to bypass the constrained listing pipeline of these centralized exchanges. But they were constrained for a reason. They were forcing everything into these really high price points, which could, you know, create the type of margins that justified the gas fees and the gas wars, right? So we were like, you know, if this gets drawn to its logical conclusion, where does it end up? It's like anyone can you know, build and launch and market and sell their NFTs. Everyone's a creator. There'll be hundreds of thousands of them, maybe millions of creators. So let's just make the tools to allow people to do that. So that's where the first reference implementation for Metaplex came from, was this idea of like, you know, Shopify for NFTs. So anyone can launch a storefront. And then Metaplex team, you know, picked that up and started running with it. And Steven, you know, ended up going to run that. But yeah, I mean, I think the initial belief was just that one of ones would find a much broader user base of creators and audiences, and it would be like a cottage industry, and that would be only possible with the performance of something like Solana. What we found very quickly was that the ability to launch a generative profile photo project was like had a lot of truth to it, and a lot of people were thinking about it, but they didn't have the means to do it in a cost-effective way, because 10,000 NFTs, minting them is expensive.
Yep.
If you don't have Solana, and you know, and actually going through and creating like a generative project is complicated if you're not like, especially if you're not intimately familiar with Solana. And DGen Ape Academy was kind of the first really distinct art style that we saw on Twitter, was just like starting to catch hold. And I don't know how much of a hand I had in it, if at all. But I just remember seeing like deep in my comment section that ape, you know, art, and I was like, that's dope, like that's great. And I went in there and I saw the brand they were building around it with the crayons, you know, the fact that even just their website had like 3D renderings of like what looked like an ape had drawn the sign with reverse, you know, backward letters, and it was very playful, and it just like, I just sent that to Metaplex team and our engineers. I was like, all I said was, this looks dope. Like this, I think this could be really cool, really good. And so everyone was watching it, and I think a lot of people felt that way about the art, that it was like they were trying something new, they were doing something different, they had a distinct brand, and that there was maybe something special, if this worked out, about being the first really breakout Solana-based NFT project. So then it all just compounded on itself, and I think, you know, everyone kind of knows the story, but it's like hundreds of thousands of people showed up for the first time. They were all making Solana wallets for the first time. Phantom was fairly new at that point, and so, you know, the UX was there where it was fairly easy, and that was enough, right? That was enough for everyone, not just me or anyone, you know, that I work with, but the entire Solana community, to know that like we made it, right? If one project can succeed in that way, drawing hundreds of thousands of users, and of course the launch was horrible. It was so broken. You had the exiled apes, But like that to me is part of the truth of this phase of this industry and any early industry, is that the stories of how things go wrong is just as valuable as, you know, when things go completely right. It's actually kind of boring to me when you have like a major launch, somebody doing something really brand new and innovative and taking a big swing, and it just all goes right and they have like great numbers. That's like kind of, you know, that's, I think actually in a way that may be worse long term, because when you have that filter up front of people that like stick with it, you know, through the hard times, I think that creates like this lore around a project that is, you can't replicate it, right? It can only happen if you really actually risk everything and like almost die, you know?
Yeah.
Solana almost died a bunch of times. I think the community already has this resilience from that. And yeah, you know, DJ Napes, to me, that's why DJ Nape is always my profile photo, because I love it. First of all, I love mine. It's a great like honorary, but it's also like, it reminds me of that, you know, really intense time, that fracture and repair of the community, and like the birth of, you know, NFTs like being taken seriously on Solana. And now there's like 100,000 profile photo projects on Solana, which is crazy.
Yeah, that fracture and repair is so familiar to us.
I was actually just gonna say, I was like, man, this is too real. This is too real.
Yeah, you all are just like living in it every day. Like, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I remember.
Constant repair.
In January, I think Josh and one of our other co-founders was like, man, it's like every morning it feels like you're like jumping into a vat of boiling like oil. Like, yeah, no, we've definitely lived through some pretty fun times.
Were either of you like did you ever work in product, or, I mean, you worked in like product orgs before, right?
Go first.
Yeah, I was a PM at Google.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know how they always say like, when you're hiring new product managers, you'll take someone who's shipped product over someone who hasn't shipped product, all else held equal, like all day every day, right? Because it's just like boxing, you know. It's like, until you've stepped in the ring and just been punched in the face, you know, there's just something that's different, you know, something that you can only replicate by like putting yourself out there, especially in product, you know, when in, you know, software, it's a competitive industry, and if you're in charge of a launch, like there's a piece of you in that, and to have it go out and like not go perfectly, which is all the time, that's every time, right? But for you have this delusional belief, no matter what, before you do it the first time, you have this delusional belief that it's going to go wonderfully and the rest of your career is going to be incredible and you're going to be the most successful product person ever, right? But like getting hit in the face really hard that first time is like, it's a rite of passage. And I see the same thing with these artists, you know, with creators. It's just like, it has to happen. That's my biggest advice to everybody who's launching a project. It's the only thing that I talk to them about now. Like Shaq and his team, you know, and like Steph Curry and them, and like all these people, you know, that are coming in. I think actually the people that have existing audiences are getting better at this. Like, you know, realizing that first of all they have to connect and immerse in the, you know, in the state of things, build their audience, and then that things are just gonna go super wrong, and they have to like, you know, push through it. That's part of it.
This is so good. I mean, I feel like we have a Launchpad product offering, of course, and we try to provide the white glove service. Everything's gonna be fine. Of course, it's never like that, right? But now I feel like, man, we should do what Raj does. Just tell like, hey guys, you're on Launchpad, but get ready to get punched in the face still. You know, that could be the pitch. Well, I would like to ask one last question, if that's cool.
Sure.
Cool. Like, and really on the theme of like fracture repair. Like, we at Magic Eden, I think it's the same, and in some ways, you know, we launched 6 months ago. We never thought we'd be here today, and feel like actually incredibly privileged to be here today. Like, grateful every day, and of course, we went through so many ups and downs, like dealing with derivatives, like copyright issues, getting Rugs, Balloonsville on our platform, going down, and it was, and sometimes it feels like when it rains, it pours. It all happens at the same time, right? So
these things all did happen.
They all did happen at the same time, and you know, we'd love to just hear some advice. You know, basically, right? Like someone who's built. You know, I can't even imagine the product that you guys built, because you built a product to support an ecosystem. I don't even know how to define that user, but we built a DApp, and we understand our users. They're like our creators and collectors. But wanted to hear like your perspective on like this advice of building on crypto, going through explosive growth, but like shit going around constantly, right? And how to ultimately like live through it and
advice for builders.
I mean, I think immersing in the community of projects that are going out every day, because this is just happening. Like you don't have to have this happen to you for the first time and be the first time that you experience even being a part of this kind of fracture and repair. If you want to experience it, you can go like participate in like in a launch, go into the Discord, spend all day, like take a day off and just spend the day like immersing yourself as if it was your project, as if it was your baby, and you can see like exactly how it plays out and where things just inevitably go wrong. If you do it with 5 or 10 projects, you'll know the general profile of like problems that are happening right now. At times it was almost every project got fished. At times it was almost every project had really laggy UI bugs. At times there were periods where it was just like everything that went out had like major botting issues. All these things hopefully are temporary. I think many of them have been and have been solved, but like it's a constant war. It's a constant battlefront of the evolution of both scammers and like technology chaos monkeys that are just always trying to screw something up, right? But I think like if you go and immerse yourself in those stories with those creators and those audiences and communities, you'll find that the common thread of what successful projects have is people that are in it for a reason of togetherness, something, even if it's just something so visceral and simple, like I think a lot of what's happening in Ethereum NFTs right now, and I think a lot of Bored Ape Yacht Club's success and particularly in their art style that they built a whole movement around, is this idea of like gross out Nickelodeon humor when we were kids watching those shows is like evoked immediately for anyone who sees that art. And it has a lot of crypto culture and everything built in. And they built a wonderful like independent new brand off of it. But just the way that like the curves in some of the drips up from the mouth of some of these, like it just, everyone who saw it immediately, there's some part of their lizard brain was like, oh, yeah, it's like Nickelodeon gross out stuff, right? Like I'm into it. And so first of all, as an artist, like have something real and visceral that you're pouring onto the canvas, into your work, and build off of trends and try and catch something that's great, but like do something that resonates with you, and then just like be real and find that community that resonates around that one little shared dream or little emotion, and then like love each other and be together and find your calmness, find your center, however you can, whether that's like going walk around the block, whenever things get heated, or like have your friends with you. I think it is a very human and emotional thing. Like this is not a tech secret, right? This is a secret of being a human, right? And finding resilience as a human and with a community. Like figure those things out if you're gonna do this. And then when something goes wrong, and let's say there's like 14 hours of uncertainty about whether any of this is going to go right, like guess what you guys are going to be talking about, and guess what you're going to be leaning on to see yourselves through it and find your strength. It's the fact that you're still in it for that one thing that brought you together, that you still believe in. You feel like it's special. There's something interesting about it, That's where I think the most successful projects come from, and I think that's where people will find their resiliency.
Bloody amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
That's a great note to end on.
Oh yeah.